Hello folks, I'm L.A. Little, and this is your daily TA wrap, where we take a look at these markets from a neoclassical perspective and ask ourselves what happened today, and what does it tell us about tomorrow. I do the show 4 times a week. I do it Monday through Thursday, live at 9 o'clock Eastern Time here from the beautiful mountains of Colorado. Folks, today really, to me, it was a nothing day. I don't know that there was anything today that would make me want to go out and buy anything, sell anything. It all comes down to the big employment numbers tomorrow and how those shape up in terms of expectations and in terms of what the implications are with respect to the Fed tapering. That seems to be one of the major things that's driving everything anymore. And if we pull in the charts and look at them, we can see that today, really on the S&P, we went nowhere. Before we dive into that, let's look at the ending numbers here. We had the composite, actually the Dow Jones. Let's start with that one, up 6 points, 14,937. We had the S&Ps up 2. 1655, the composite tacked on 9 3/4, 3658 3/4. The NDX was up 5.5, 3129, almost 3130, and the Russell was the leader on the upside, 1028.5, up 3.1. We actually had gold down pretty big today, down about 22 bucks. The bonds sold off pretty hard. They're up tonight. The dollar was up almost 2/3 of a point or percent, and commodities across the board were down with the exception of oil, and the oil energy sectors benefited from that. There's a lot of talk about Syria. There's a lot of talk about the tapering. Who's going to be the replacement at the Fed head? All these things, there's a lot of discussion. And my expectation when we came into all this is that we could get a bounce, that we could then probably work back down lower. The last couple of days I've started to think differently because of the way the volumes shaped up in terms of what we did. If you remember, the 27th bar was the measurement stick, if you will, right? The top of that bar, 1652.54. If you go back over, the swing point high, 1654.19. We got as high today as 59. We closed at 55. So we're actually over the swing point high. We're over this bar. That doesn't mean that we can't go down. I mean, you can always still fail, right? Because we went into resistance today. We held into it. That will just cause it to redraw again tomorrow, probably up here at the swing point high. But notice the difference between this push back up in the last one. On the last one, you got that 2 bars, and then you sold off. Here, you've been struggling, and now you kind of got a nice little run going here on 3.5, 4 bars on the way up, right? Volume expands. Back here, volume didn't expand at all. It shrunk. So there are definitely some differences with respect to how this looks compared to that. You're also coming from a lower base, right? You got down farther. You tried to break into this big bar down, which really comes off of this low. That's 1628. We got to 1629 to 28. We got down to 27. We got down to 20. Right? We came into it multiple times, couldn't break it down. That is what's fueling this run. The employment numbers tomorrow is going to make a difference one way or the other, because only one side can win in the end. And that side is either going to be the bulls or the bears. And if you pull this thing back and you look at a longer term perspective, this thing's quite bullish, has been for a long time, still is. Again, that doesn't mean we can't break down. We still can. So you can't just back up the truck here and load up. But you do have to look at what's happening. And what's happening is that there's a decent chance that this thing could pop higher. And if it does pop higher, right, then you're going to see some scrambling to get in again, because so many times we've seen these V-shaped moves get going and they never stop. And believe me, if it gets over the swing point high, that's what everybody's going to be talking about. Now, if we go to the Nasdaq, this is the strong sector, and we have to keep looking at it. The swing point high on this guy is 36.84. Today it got as high as 36.65, so 20 points away. Volume's not huge, but volume's okay on the way back up. You're into the bar now. The bottom of the bar is 36.52. You closed today at 36.58, so you're into the swing point high bar. You're also into this swing point high bar, going to try to get into the next level, and the swing point high bar over here is much higher, 36.81. So 36.81 is what we're trying to get into. That's the highest high, but you've got 3 swing point highs lined up. This thing wouldn't break down. It's setting up to make a shot to get over these. And if it does, it's going to cause anxiety. Tomorrow, you know, we've seen 40, 50 point moves in this index. Tomorrow, if that employment number, no matter what it comes out to be, if it entices the buyers to come in and start buying, and they start ramping this thing, you know, it's going to go take those highs out, and you got to believe there's stops up there. So that's the risk on the upside. What's the risk on the downside? Well, the risk on the downside is you come down and you start breaking things again. If we go look at the Dow, you know, the Dow being the weakest, we should look at it from that perspective. It still could not close over the August 27th high. That was 39. It closed at 37. So you're 2 points under it, right? This thing could still fail. It actually did an over-under, but this isn't an extended move. It is a doji. This actually, if you're looking at just candles and looking at the Dow in isolation, this looks like some sort of a continuation down failure today. So from that perspective, that's your negative side. SPX still over the highs, that's a positive. IXC, NDX, all of those, they're positives. They're not negatives. They're still positives. No, they didn't quite do what we wanted, but hey, they're right at the swing point highs, folks. They're within stone's throws at this point. So again, comes down to tomorrow. We'll see what the employment numbers do and whether or not they can push this thing up or not. Here's the Russell. The Russell's getting back up. It's going to try to get to the high on the 27th bar. You know, again, there's really no excitement here, but you can't expect excitement in front of a big number. Go back and look at what's happened the last 7 days, though. We've had quite a bit of economic reports, almost all of them better than expected. We had ECB, BOE, all of those guys this morning, Bank of Japan last night, all of them still flooding us with money. Even if the Fed tapers, folks, they're still going to be shooting us with a fire hose. You know, instead of 85 billion, you get 75 billion. You know, is it going to make that big of a difference? No, it's still 75 billion flowing in. When they really start to turn and they really start to sell what they have, then we're going to see some impact. Right now, it's just the fear of a turn. But this is a steamliner, right? This is not, you know, a ski boat. We're talking about a luxury liner. It's going to take a while to turn. It's not going to happen fast. So even if this does take place, yeah, opinions can change fast, but I suspect it's going to take a while to break down. Now, if we want to look at the taper side of it, we need to go over and look at the OX markets, and in particular look at the TLT. Because the TLT is the one that's signaling whether or not this Fed's going to taper, and is it going to push interest rates higher. It's the 20-year bond. The big bar off the bottom was here, 102.74. My thought was that it would try to get back to it. Well, not only did it get back to it, it got under it. Now, it got under it with less volume, but you know that's into the support zone. It's going to wipe it out, and there's not much down here. If it breaks again, it could start another leg down. 102.11 is the number there. If I pop over here, that bar's got 50 million on it, right? So far this week, with today we had 16, and today we've got another 10, so that's 26, and it's a 4-day week. So if we divide that by 3, that's what, 26 by 3 is about 8 times 5 is about 40. So you can see the volume's not there on the way back, but you know, if they get under it, they can extend it again. So we'll have to see. Now, a break of this would put you over about 3% on the bonds, and on the interest rates, you know, 3% on the interest rates. And so that's one of the things that you know is going to be a big hurdle to try to get over and stay over. And that's why this thing is starting to find buyers at this level, I suspect. So tomorrow will be a big day here in terms of what the employment numbers tell us. You know, have we already priced in the taper or not? You've got to watch the equity markets to see the reaction. You got to watch the bonds to see the reaction, and you need to watch the dollar. Now, the dollar gained strength today based on the fact that everybody else is going to keep flooding the market. And the assumption here is taper as well. Swing point high was 22.30. We got over today, stayed over 22.33. Going to try to run into the next big bar is 22.31. We're into that bar now, just barely. Got no volume, right? You're coming into the big heavy bars. It did get over the swing point. If it can hold over it here, it can try to make a run to the next one, and that's going to put you up in this 22.50 area. That's another 20 cents, another percent in terms of move. If we go look at the junk bonds, we were actually looking at these last night. They look to be coming back into that swing point low. Going to try to test it just like the TLT is doing. These are moving in sync. This one should be more volatile if in fact we start to break down. It's another good one to watch. Again, you're coming into a big bar. It's going to be hard to break them down. Oil was up today. That got the energy sector going. It wasn't up that much, but up. It does look like there's a good chance that you know, Obama may get what he wants and do enough arm twisting to get the votes that he wants. Gold and silver sold off. Now, why would they do that? You know, beats me, folks. All I do is read the charts. I don't try to figure out all the relationships. It certainly immediately, all I can tell you here is this thing had a huge run, and it makes sense to pull back, and that's what it's doing. You're coming back into, now you got to look at what you're coming into, right? You had this bar. Your support zones are really way back here because that's where all the big wide price spread high volume bars are. So this thing can't redraw higher until you either get some big volume up here or some really wide price spread and high volume, or these fall off the chart, which they will in a couple of weeks. So right now, you know, you don't have great support up here anywhere. Low of this one's 132.50. The top here is 132.36. That's a zone. It came into it today, closed underneath the zone. So it's trying to break them down. It has less volume. So now it's going to come back and do the retest, regenerates on the highs. High was 130.14. It's at 131.80. So if this doesn't repel it and push it back tomorrow, I would expect that you'll get a move down into this bar. Volume there is 8.8, and we did 11 today. So again, if you've been riding the gold train, you got to let it come back some, or you got to average into it slowly and then look for it to turn again at some point. And I suspect it will, given the scenario. But you know, gold's a hard trade. This thing can move 30-40%. Well, the stocks themselves can, not so much gold itself. But you had an ABCD up, didn't quite finish, got pretty close though. So you had A point here, the B there, C on this one, then ran on up, almost finished it. Needed to get over the swing point high to finish. But notice it failed into this bar, which is where it made sense. 136.75 on the weekly, 137.55, which closed at 134.62. That was a failure on the weekly. That should pull back. If we use the weekly, 130.51 is the support zone. Let's go back over here. 130.51 gets us back. Yeah, I'm trying to see exactly what it would take us to. Back into this bar. So almost to the swing point highs. Yeah, so a little overshoot of that gets you into swing point high, and then you've got great support coming back in from this big bar. Silver's the same sort of story, just the other way around. I skipped the sectors tonight because most of them aren't telling us anything. There's a failure on about 3 of them. 2 or 3 of them actually got a little bit higher, XLE in particular, and but none of them finished great. The market didn't finish great tonight, so I don't think they're telling us anything. I saw some questions. If you have questions, tonight's a good night because I have some time. So let's start taking these, and if there's some of you out there that have more questions, just pop them in and I'll try to answer them as we go. Okay, let's start with the first one from Tommy. FCX has seen volume off the bottom and a long base. So let's bring FCX up and see what it looks like as we talk. It's got a long base, but with gold and JJC struggling here, it would seem like it's going to have a hard time going forward, even with the XME XLB moving higher. Okay, so FCX. So this is the copper, Freeport McMoran. They produce a lot of metals. Copper's the main one. Gold as probably the secondary one. I don't know the exact details, but I know they're a big copper producer. The JJC really hasn't done much now. You do have to realize, though, that China is starting to kick in. So, I mean, if I pull up FXI and just look at it as a proxy, and there's some other ones, China's starting to kick in. So, you know, a lot of Freeport's business is what happens in China, and China is starting to kick in, and that's why you've seen this one hold up as well as it has, even with copper being depressed to some degree. And copper, if we pop to copper right quick, actually let's do that, because copper is such a big piece of these guys. If you remember copper on the weekly, copper was trying to come up to do the retest regenerate. So the first one to test was the low here, 41.70. That is 394. So 41.70, and actually that one had already retested once before, so that's not a fair one to retest. But you saw more volume coming into it, slightly more volume. Yeah, I think the real test will be the next set of bars if it can get up there. That will be the high on this one, the lows on that one. That takes you up to 43.5 on copper. So copper itself to me doesn't look that bad. I think it can work higher. But let's go back to Freeport, and then let's move over to the real question, which is a steel company, Cleveland Heights, I think it is. Cleveland Heights, I don't know. Cleveland something. Okay, so what do we got here? We're coming into resistance. We're failing. We're basing. Let's go back and look at the weekly real quick on this one. So that was a good turn. Hammer reversal. Yeah, this one can easily trade back to this low, 29 bucks. 28.91.29. So it's going to easily come back to here, and it's not that far away. Okay, so that's the first thing. I think it would actually hold there, though. Let's go look at CLF, though, as an alternative. So CLF is in the steel sector, and it had a nice push up and actually left volume at the top. That's not a bad sign. Actually, this chart looks a lot better than FCX. On the daily, let's see what the weekly looks like. The weekly got over the highs, 50.2, you did 50.8. Yeah, this chart looks a lot better. So that looks good. Let's look at the sector. So, oh, this is Cliffs Natural Resources. I thought this was a steel stock, but it's not. So I apologize. I was looking at the wrong thing. So yeah, that stock does look well. And actually, the steel stocks are starting to look pretty good too. If I look at how they're coming back up in general. We're getting a lot of sectors doing this, folks. It's why it's hard to be so many people are so bearish on this market. It's September, it's October, we've been up so far, we got all this uncertainty, market's going to crash. Well, come on. I mean, the stocks don't look bad. They really don't. I mean, I'd like to be more negative, but I can't. Yeah, I mean, it's just not negative. So I do like CLF. That is Cliffs Natural Resources. That looks good. Looks good. So what do they do? I'd have to go look them up. Lots of things, mainly coal. Okay, thanks, X. So what is the coal sector? Maybe somebody can pop that in there. We'll look at that sector. Let's go look at the next question while somebody tells me that. Good evening, LA. What do you think about buying Microsoft? Well, I think Microsoft is a buy around 30. How far did it get down? Almost there, 31. So did it test that big low? 3102. Tested it here, and you're back testing again, 30.95. I think it's a buy. I think it's a buy here, and the reason I talked about 30, if I pull over to the weekly, is you've got the nice big strength bars, wide price spread, and the low on that guy's 30.27. The high on this one's 30.32, right in that area. So if this were to pop down in there, I think it's a great place to pick some up. I think you can turn 10% on it pretty easy. It's just very negative right now with them buying out Nokia. And you know, I can't tell you the economic reasons of that deal, but certainly the market didn't like it. It was $9 billion out of their pocket for one thing, but then again, they got cash running over. Let's see what the next question. Oh, so let's go back to coal. So the coal stocks, KOL. Let's see what that sector looks like to go along with the CLF question. So here's the coal sector, since that's their largest. Doesn't look bad. Wow. On a daily, doesn't look bad. Let's see what the weekly. So this thing has been beaten up like beyond recognition, but it can travel all the way back up here pretty easy. What is that bottom? 2064, and your swing point is 2149. So 2064, we're trading at 19. Yeah. The sector doesn't look like it's going to run off anywhere, but it's still supportive. So yeah, CLF looks okay. Let's look at the next question. GDX. What do you see for GDX daily? Do you think GDX will bounce here, or do we get more follow through to the downside? Let me pop to a different screen for myself, my subsector screen, where those guys live. Let's pull them up and see what they look like. So GDX. Okay, what is this doing? Okay, so it's coming after the low. The current low is 27.54. Got the 27.54 close. Has less volume. So it's doing a retest regen on that high. The breakout bar had 66. You're underneath that, and so you really got to start looking at this bar as well, right? If you get all the way to the bottom here, right? So the first time back on a retest regen, where you came into this high, which was 28.35, you should see it go sideways and get a bounce. Well, it tried, but it didn't go anywhere. And now you're starting to break down lower, which kind of looks like it wants to go test the lows. Yeah, I certainly wouldn't have bought it today, given the volume expansion and testing the low. And the thing is tomorrow, by the time the market opens, this is either going to be up 2% or down 2%. So I don't think you really have a choice. So I think your trade tomorrow is kind of irrelevant unless it actually bounces, pulls back, and gives you an entry, right? So in other words, it opens up 2%, pulls back about 1%, then it's a buy, right? And then you put your stops right up underneath here. If it doesn't though, right? If it gets back into this bar, you'd want to be able to buy it near the bottom of the bar. It closed tonight at 27.54. Bottom of that's 28.11. So if you get about a 2% jump, 2.5%, 3% in the morning, and it pulls back 1 or 2, and you can get close to the bottom of the bar. It's a buy. You buy it there, put your stop underneath it. Okay, that was GDX. And I do like the gold miners going forward, folks. I don't think their run's done. It's just that they can move 20-30%, so you kind of have to be careful how you pick them. Next question. That's great. I don't get to do this often. Just run through questions. GDX. I'm short GDX. Looking to get out. Oh. Well, same thing. If it breaks down in the morning, you're going to be jumping for joy, and then you're going to look for this bar here, 2609. If it doesn't break down in the morning, it actually opens up on you, then you're going to want to take the first retrace and get out. So tomorrow will, your decision is going to be made for you. By the time you get a chance to short, by the time you get a chance to close your position, it's just, it's either going to open up 2 or down 2. Or it isn't going to give a flip, which means I'd probably stay with it. Especially if it can close under this on a Friday. Hang on a second. Let me look at the weekly. Okay, on the week. Oh, you got a big bar here on the weekly. 2705. 2705. Where is that on daily? Man, it's like right where it is almost, huh? Yeah, it's the bottom of this bar is what it is. 2705 right there. Well, that's going to be tough to get under. So, since we're at the end of the week, you want it, if you're going to stay with it over the weekend, it needs to close under 2705. So if it does start down tomorrow and doesn't want to close over 2705, under it, that's where I take my money. If it closes under it, I could stay with it. Otherwise, I got to find a way out. So that's the way I look at that one. Let me see here. So y'all gave me KOL, XME, a mining and natural resources company. Yeah, metallurgic coal, lump ore. Okay, cool. 60-minute chart. There's a gap there on the GDX. Well, let's see what the GDX looks like over here. GDX 10 minutes. 10 days. Well, you got a gap up here, right? I don't know, maybe farther back you got a gap. Yeah, you got a little gap down here. Still, that's going to be the area. That was the breakout area. So that 27 is kind of key. So it's got to close under that. All right, folks, tomorrow really comes down to the employment number. We've had good economic news. If that employment number comes in line, my expectation is that you're going to see this market try to push higher. If you get a huge number on either side, way down or way up in terms of employed or unemployed, then it's probably going to be a rough day. Inline, somewhere around the 180 number that I think they're expecting, it's probably gonna work its way higher. But anything majorly over or under is probably going to be a problem. That's the way I'd view it. Folks, thank y'all so much. You have yourself a great weekend and good day trading tomorrow. And until next time, I'm L.A. Little. This is and was your daily TA wrap. You have yourself a great night, and I'll see you next time. Good night, folks.